It's great to see everyone, some familiar faces, some new faces. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here and share with you some of my thoughts and insight. And I was asked to talk a little bit about, I'm kind of a wandering talker, so to talk a little bit about research mentorship. Really, when I think about mentorship, it really, it crosses all boundaries. I mean, I could just as easily talk to you about teaching or service or anything else that we all are familiar with. But the theme for me, and one that I've used in writing many times and talking about this, is kind of raising the boat for everybody, right? Everybody knows this. I mean, really good mentoring, really good teaching is really about helping others be their best selves and to find opportunities and ways to kind of navigate their career. That's really my theme today. I don't know if it's groundbreaking at all, no matter what Melinda said about me. This is, I think, pretty common sense. But what I have found, I was talking to Dr. Chang a little bit about this, whether it's students, faculty, friends, colleagues, when I think about this topic, what I continually discover in my career path is that sometimes what I think people know, they do not. I mean, really, like you don't know that? You don't know this opportunity or this person or this way to navigate this area. And so as Melinda said, let's say not in years, but a long kind of career path here. And I have a kinship with Dr. Chang because my minor was in chemistry. Do not test me on that. I'm an infectious disease person. So I'm got some broad topics here, and again, I can't wait for the Q&A at the end to kind of talk about this. So the first kind of question that I was asked to kind of address was, how do you kind of connect with senior level mentorship? And I know many of you in here are a little further along in your career, others are brand new and all in between, but what I've found is even after 22 years at Texas State and 10 years at a prior employer, I still find connections and I still find opportunities to learn new things, even after all those years. So the first thing I would ask, especially if you're new or relatively new, is do you know any formal mentoring programs, right, in your unit? Seems logical, but sometimes people don't know they exist because they're not in a policy. People don't always talk about them. They kind of go on hiatus for a while and then they get resurrected, has been my experience. Things kind of ebb and flow in academia. So ask your chair, ask your director, ask your dean, ask your research officer, ask anyone, is there an actual formal mentoring program? And I'm gonna steal a little bit of Dr. Chang's thunder here, because that could be also as a kind of a student or faculty kind of level, because that's really important. There are also, in my experience in infectious disease, microbiology, I'm in multiple organizations, and I'm a mentor and a mentee in these organizations at the national and or maybe international level or state level. So if you have an opportunity to peek into that world in your particular professional organizations, I think you'll sometimes find formal mentoring. And I'll come back to this later when I talk about more formal types of things here. And then of course we all look around the room, we look around our college, we look around our university, and we think about peer mentors, and probably some of the most important mentors in our lives. As my father-in-law told me when I first started dating his daughter, he was a pre-K educator for 40 years, and he says, never ever try to teach a 3-year-old how to tie their shoes, have a 5-year-old teach them. Right? Why? I forget how to teach that process, but someone who's just ahead of you in the tenure track process, or even if you're non-tenure track, just ahead of you, is really valuable knowledge, because they just went through that trench and you are in it, right? You are in it to win it, and they can be really helpful. And then, I don't know if everybody agrees with this, you just really can't have enough mentors, because sometimes you need a cheerleader, sometimes you need someone that's going to kick you in the butt occasionally to get something done. You need mentors that have certain specializations, including teaching and service and things like this. So don't be afraid to look for those mentors. And then kind of the next steps that I think about on this question is based on that expertise you have. Everybody has expertise, typically, subject matter expertise. Is there a research team? Not all colleges have these, but some have labs. some have teams, some have groups or actually mentoring groups that have research teams with senior level mentors in that group. And as I'll keep saying, teaching and service kind of crosses this line as well. How can you approach that team and add value to the team? Are you an outstanding research design person? Could you be a research designer or statistician, even though maybe you're a chemist? Could you add that value to an educational grant for peer mentoring in chemistry for undergrads? So, try to think outside of your expertise with respect to connecting to people that can put you into these types of team situations. Again, kind of thinking of the early career person here, especially who need grant opportunities, who need publications, who need to build that network. I mean, you know this, but networking is so critical in this area to kind of hook up with that. And then always be prepared to kind of discuss your expertise, goals, and skills. I found that this is not only a problem for students sometimes, but also faculty. It's really about your makeup and kind of how you come into the academic setting. I came into the academic setting from the Department of Health in Austin and CDC. And while I did grants and I did publications, it was in big teams. And so to kind of come in and start talking about Rodney and what values I could bring was a little uncomfortable at times. The tenure process is like that, right? It's like you have to kind of sometimes share what you can do well, even if you're super humble and you're like, I don't want to do that. Others aren't going to do it for you necessarily. So you kind of need to think about that as you work within these senior level mentor groups. And then finally, it doesn't hurt to just ask, right? If you ask a college or a department or even an organization, just because someone names you a leader or mentor doesn't mean that's your actual person you're talking to. It might be somebody down the hall in sociology that's totally outside of your discipline that just has great advice, right? So sometimes the mentor may not be a formal mentor and you may have to ask for that. So I got a couple of examples. Whether it's teaching or service, we all know the kind of the three legs of the stool for most professors, right? So when I first got here, I got here in 2002, right as the new president, Dr. Trouth, was starting. We came in together, and my dean, a dean that I just met, looked at my CV, looked at my resume, and without me even volunteering or thinking about this, he said, there's a vacancy on the IACUC at the university level. And all you'll hear when you first get here as a new tenure track person is be careful of service commitments, be careful you don't get put on, and that's true. I totally agree with that. But my point here is do not be afraid to dip your toe into certain committees at the university or college level that make sense and can help you kind of synergize your research expertise. So what did this mean for me? Does anybody know what IACUC means? What is it, Clay?
Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee.
Animal research. I came out of the Department of Health. All I did was rabies, hantavirus, influenza. That was my whole world for a decade, and it's still going. And so when he looked at that, he went, oh, no brainer here. Let's get you on that committee. And on that committee, I met people like Dr. Dana Garcia, Dr. Michael Farsner, multiple other people. I think I even met Clay at sometimes through that route. And so I was in the College of Health Professions, which really doesn't talk animal research. It's all human research. But humans are connected. And so when I sat on that committee, I immediately, in the fall of 2002, started making connections with people that were what I would consider well established on this campus, if not the nation and the world, for like Dr. Forstner, in how I could connect. Not just with them, but they knew the routes immediately to ORSP and to different entities for me. I mean, within the first year. I mean, it was, looking back, critically important for me to make those connections right there. So those can absolutely lead to research mentors via networking. I still have mentors from that relationship. And again, always going back to kind of these thoughts that I seem are logical, but sometimes people don't do it. Ask your chair, talk with your dean, ask your associate dean for research, ORSP. You're here today. Great opportunity to network and talk with people like Melinda and others within the Translational Health Research Center. And then another one I just wanted to mention, because in the last 7 or 8 years, this has become of all likelihood because of COVID, but even before that a little bit, of finding some mentors that I've never met in person, that I've published with internationally, that I've done podcasts with internationally on my research expertise, and in many ways, they are great mentors because they come from different institutions, different cultures, different walks of life. And so not something to totally disallow if you're on social media. You got to be careful, of course, but some of these individuals can be really, really helpful if you make those connections. Quick flip of the script here a little bit is, how can you become that mentor for other faculty, right? So how can you become a mentor for other faculty? When I talk to my students, so again, I've been here 22 years, so I've got about 450 alumni now that I've taught, and I ask them, or colleagues and friends, what they think I do well as a mentor. And I've thought about this quite a bit, and I've done some writing on this. These are kind of the 3 that bubble to the top. There's a lot of other things, but it's relationships. I mean, that's really all mentoring is it's relationships and the ability to listen. And for me, I do this actively. I've done it with students who sometimes come back to me and they say, how did you know to put that in my letter of recommendation to medical schools? Because I took a note. This was important to you, and when I heard you talking about you wanted to do a fellowship at CDC or something, I made that note, and then I worked to help you get there, right? And so I try to model that behavior. I'm working to achieve in the mentee, and this absolutely, I think, crosses all levels of students and faculty. We all have a little bit of insider knowledge about different things, and that's what this means. And when you share that, it's so impactful, it's so gratifying. I mean, it's one of the things I love about my job is doing this in a sense that I can help a first-generation student or even a first-generation faculty member, like I was, and a first-gen student, learn about an opportunity that they just had no clue about. And that's the first step. Like, oh, I did a fellowship with the USDA, and I notice you're in the agriculture department, and did you know there's a fellowship to kind of check this out? And a lot of times they don't even realize there's stuff like that available. So, as I tell my friends and my children who are in their mid-20s now, and even my wife and others, any good friendship, any good marriage, any good partnership, any good collegial effort is really about working at it and sustaining it and kind of nurturing that as you go along. In the medical field, we always say, see one, teach one, do one. You guys ever heard of that phrase? In other words, with students especially, you watch first, then you have to teach someone else, and then you do it. And in mentoring, I mean, it's kind of the same thing, right? You kind of see great mentors. Hopefully you start navigating into teaching great other colleagues, and then just actually becoming that person within your unit, right? I think it can be a natural gift. I sometimes feel like I didn't do any real formal training on mentoring in my early life or early career. This was later, including Melinda pointing things out to me when I first joined her team that, are you aware of this actual program? And so I immediately signed up and start doing more formal, not just literature learning, but like actual workshops and tools that I can put in my toolbox. Before that, it was really just more of a natural thing to me. But I think we all have some of that in us. And for me, ultimately, as I kind of get to the end of my part here, what I always try to think about is really deciding how I can help students or faculty with unknown opportunities. And you've heard me say that before. So for mentoring for me, that's really what it is. How can I help you find a grant opportunity that you had no idea about, but I had some knowledge about, and bring you into that team? Don't forget about helping people along the way be recognized and gain honors and awards. It's important in your world, even though it might be uncomfortable for you personally. You can certainly help nominate people and do good things to help them get to that stage of their life. And then protecting time, right? I fell at this big time, right? As Melinda pointed out, I know this about myself, and I've gotten better. And that's what I tell my wife when she's like shaking her head at me, you know, and I'm doing another thing, and it's like I just can't help myself. I like working across all colleges, all individuals, but I have learned to start saying no for certain things. So you do have to watch that. And then this does cross my path sometimes with people I've mentored, students and others. Some people don't really want to always share their resources and examples. And of course, patented material, trade secrets, all those things I understand, but sharing certain things is really beneficial, especially if you're going to be part of that team effort. And I'll kind of wrap up here with nothing beats encouragement. Everybody likes encouraging words. Everybody likes thank yous. Everybody likes attaboy, attagirl, attateam. And it's really, in my life, has been really impactful, right? Whether it's a handwritten note, whether it's an email, whether it is an email to their supervisor. Ooh, that's good stuff. Do it for them. Tell their dean, this person's kicking butt in my research team. That's really useful to do. As you may become leaders, that's something to think about. It's a shared responsibility. It's a two-way effort or multiple effort. And then that last part is sometimes not the most easy thing to do, but setting goals and really being, giving effective and honest feedback, trying not to micromanage too much and work to that mentee's strengths, and setting those timelines, directions, and deliverables. Because what I have found all the way back to my undergrad and master's thesis levels and things like that, I need someone kind of telling me accountability matters, and I'm going to meet you every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. It still works for me. And I think most mentor-mentee relationships need that. I've been part of formal professional organizations that have a mentor program, and sometimes they're amazing, and sometimes I never hear from the mentee again, like after one initial meeting. We've all had that. So it is a back and forth type of thing. Team-based, connecting, not just to that one mentee, but to other people in your circles that can be relevant for resources and opportunities and so forth. Again, not telling you things you don't know. And then just being honest with your time and expectations within all of this, because we all have our own time and our own things to kind of deal with. And I know I'm running out of time, so I did want to give you a big list of resources. I believe some of this will be shared. And so some of these are personal, some of these are through, Melinda turned me on to the National Research Mentoring Network. So there are definite formal things to check out if you're not aware of some of these resources. This is just a short list. And I'll leave it there for Carolyn Chang, and thank you again for your opportunity. Happy to talk with you anytime if you have any questions.
It's not quite afternoon. I was going to say good afternoon, y'all, but no, not yet. Okay, so I'm going to pick up the clicker off from what Rodney was talking about. I think it's great to do these presentations back to back because I probably will echo a lot of things that Rodney highlighted. So I was asked to speak to y'all today about how to get students into our research, how to mentor them, and how to use that to get grants, which is a lot to do in 15 minutes. So I prepared these slides on the assumption they'd be shared, so I have a lot of links in there for you to extend your learning. And so I'm talking about how we're going to create student success stories in Research Galore. And so thank you, Melinda, for introducing me. I have my research training in, everyone thinks it's biochemistry. I started off here in biochemistry, but it's actually host-pathogen interactions. So I have more in common with Rodney than he knows. But I came to Texas State originally for the fish. I started off in the Cyphophorus Center, and I moved my career and portfolio into research training programs and STEM workforce development and administering federal training programs for that here at Texas State. And so currently I oversee our DHSI programs that are from the Department of Education in the Academic Services Department. And so I just want to start off by saying the landscape of mentoring and research and mentoring students is ever changing. There's new bodies of work coming out, new recommendations, and new guidelines coming out from our funding agencies constantly. And so you're never done staying up to date, and you need to stay relevant on these things for your proposals. And so, this is just a good source when you're thinking about mentoring that links kind of our two presentations. You're going to have mentoring networks, and we often think of a very traditional dyad with just a mentor and a mentee. And really, you have, a nest with lots of nodes and different mentors, and you may be a different circle in these diagrams, whether you're a postdoc, a grad student, a junior faculty, or a senior faculty. And so I'm quickly going to cover 3 main topics. Who are the key players and their motivations when we're talking about student mentorship? I'm going to cover some best practices and resources and just emphasize why you need to know these things. And then have some strategic direction when you're thinking about applying for sponsored programs related to training programs. And so at Texas State, we have lots of faculty doing research with tons of research expenditures. We also have a huge number of students, both undergraduate and graduate. And the statistic I thought that would be the most interesting to y'all is if you're looking at our first destination survey Career Services puts out, we have 30 to 50% that are career engaged. They're already doing things to develop professionally to get their career. And I'm sure everyone in here would agree, and our workforce advisory councils agree, that having a research experience is a foundational step in career development. And we all have heard about our 2 pillars in our Hopes and Aspirations High. We have a big push towards student success and also our Run to R1. And I posit that student mentorship is interwoven between both of these goals. Undergraduate research experiences are shown in many studies over and over to have positive impacts on the institutional metrics that define student success, such as persistence, GPA, graduation rate. Also shown to provide students with benefits, including skill development for their professional growth. And for faculty, there's lots of benefits that have been shown in the research. Increasing student-faculty interactions and student satisfaction with faculty, increased productivity, satisfaction in teaching, increased funding, and higher H indices. And I'm mostly talking about co-curricular opportunities, but we do have a lot of curricular opportunities for students to get into research. And here's just a figure from some of those studies, and you can see that our experienced and novice research students have a higher graduating GPA and a faster time to graduation. Now, that's all great. I can say, faculty, mentor students, have them in your research. We're going to do everything. But there are some caveats. It's not that easy to just take on a whole bunch of student mentees, as many of you know. And so there's a lot of recommendations of how we can do this to better serve our faculty researchers. And some that I will sort of touch on is preparing faculty for mentoring excellence, and Rodney talked about that. Developing best fit mentoring structures and assessment processes. And so when we talk about preparing the mentor, some of this is stuff we just heard. There are established best practice guidelines, and many of them have been prepared by your funding agency of choice. And so when you're looking at funding mechanisms that want you to show how you're a trained mentor, you should probably do the training that they paid for. So for example, we have the big book on the science of effective mentorship in STEM. That's a resource. We have appropriate treatment for research trainees from the American Association of Medical Colleges. And then trainings, such as Rodney mentioned, the National Research Network for Mentoring has an online course for mentoring. You can also find CIMER, the Center for Improvement of Mentored Experiences in Research. There is entering mentoring training that you can go and do. This is NIH funded here. We have lots of facilitators at Texas State to facilitate this training, myself included. And you probably want to prepare yourself by thinking about creating a lab compact or agreement for how your mentees and you and your lab are going to all coexist. We also have to prepare the mentee, particularly when we're talking about undergraduate students. You need to think about how you're going to onboard a student that aligns with their level of entry. If you're recruiting freshmen and sophomore students who've never been in a lab, you're going to have some significant, just like adjusting to this is a lab. You're going to have to onboard to both the research environment, the research, and your mentoring relationship. And so there are a lot of resources to help you do this and that you can reference in your proposals. For example, there's books like At the Bench, A Laboratory Navigator, that NRNM has a free online course for students called Launching Research. There's two series now, and they keep making more. They can take a course such as the Idea Center's Research 3399. These are all examples. And then you're going to want to implement some sort of development plan with the student. And so I'm transitioning with my short time into how are you going to strategize and mentor students, do research, get funding. And so there are a number of funding mechanisms that have a major goal of exposing students, and this could be high school students, K through 12, undergraduate students, graduate students, and then postdoctoral trainees, to the research environment in a higher education setting. Many of these mechanisms are available to you because we are an MSI HSI institution and are specifically designed to support populations that are underrepresented in the field of your program choice. Some are training and education programs that are more significant in what you need to have to operate for the students, and so you will need to have a curriculum for their research development and a support infrastructure and possibly staff to support this. So the training programs that Melinda mentioned I worked on, those NIH Bridge to the Doctorate, the URISE, those are ones that you're going to have a more significant training plan for, and you're going to have campus counterparts working with you to implement it. And please don't recreate the wheel trying to come up with this. There's lots of folks doing these programs on this campus that can help you, and also staff who you can liaise with and take advantage of services we already have. And then there are a lot of programs that have a student involvement requirement, and these might be more applicable to everyone. And in all these applications, in their calls, they will specify the components that address your student mentoring and mentor competency and assessment. So these are going to be like specific things you're going to need to put in your proposals, and you'll be scored on. And so I have a couple examples. I can't cover them all. One that is common on this campus from the National Institutes of Health is the R15 mechanism, or Research Enhancement Award. It supports small-scale research projects at educational institutions. And you can't be an institution that has a major amount of NIH support, and they define major as $6 million or more over 4 years consecutively. We're not at that point yet, so y'all can apply. And so there are three main goals, and one of the major goals is to expose students to research. And so in your application, there are requirements like, how are you going to pay students specifically? You're going to have to answer questions like, do the PIs have suitable experience supervising and engaging with undergraduate students in their research? You should propose a research team that includes a student structure, and anecdotally, reviewers say this is like 7 to 9 students, several undergraduates, some graduate students. It's not just 1 or 2 in terms of what the committees are looking at. And the application should propose important scientific contributions made by your student research team. You need to include thoughts on how you're going to actually recruit your group of students, and this needs to be specific. For the area R15, which would be here, you need to make sure your number of students is greater than your number of researchers. And you need to define the quality of student involvement. You cannot just say, oh, we're going to have students do some work. They really want you to be specific. And the student involvement should be enough that it results in students getting to co-author papers. And so here's some examples, and this could go across other mechanisms that ask the same questions. But how are you going to involve students in the research? You can say things that they look for, like presenting at meetings and conferences, and this can just be your lab meetings and institutional conferences. You don't need to send them to international conferences. They can help design experiments, collect and analyze data, write manuscripts. And you need to make sure you're showing what they call meaningful involvement of students. And so in addition to your research strategy, which would be this stuff, you can make sure your bio sketch includes your history of mentoring students. You should highlight the papers you've co-authored with students. And you need to be specific about recruiting students. And this is all in all the presentations program officers make for these funding mechanisms. So you can always go back and look. Another example, if you have a current NIH grant at this institution, you should apply for a research supplement to promote diversity in health-related research. This is to supplement a parent grant, but you can propose to mentor students, and these can be high school students, undergraduate students, or graduate students, to bring them onto your program you already have funded. And so similar recommendations for things you have to be specific about. Another example, and so you can just go to the agencies, to the grant finders, and look for training programs, education programs, programs that highlight students, and kind of you see the same sort of things you're going to have to get into. USDA NEFA has higher education multicultural scholars program that's out right now. You're going to have, same thing, you're going to have to specify who's managing the mentoring process and what is that process. What are the training credentials for the individuals who serve as mentors? What are the mentoring activities? And this is where you need to stay up on the literature because they want to know about peer mentoring, layered mentoring. If you don't know what those are, I don't know if you can put those in your grant. Well, maybe you can, but you should stay up to date on it. And then processes to ensure reasonable accommodations for, making your program accessible. And so these are all things you got to read and be serious about in your applications because you do get scored on them. And so to kind of wrap up a lot of information in a short period of time, you want to start thinking initially, especially if you're earlier in your research career and mentoring career, who are the key players and what are their motivations? If you're the mentor, why do you want students? And then move on to how are you going to have best practice and what resources should you turn to? When you're thinking about the students, a major part of mentoring is that you both know what the mentee's goal is. You're not just advising on some prescriptive goal that's based on the same for everyone. And so what is your students' motivations? And this will also define how you can support them with grants. If their goal is to do a PhD, there's a lot of mechanisms to support students to push them into a biomedical PhD program. If their goal is to go to industry, an internship at industry and doing research with you first is probably a better idea. Staying up to date on the best practices and resources is going to be super important. Like I said, the agencies pay for a lot of these things, so read the ones that your agencies that you care about put out, because they're going to look for that. This is also where you can look to your faculty mentor to learn more about how they did all of this and push for your departments to offer these to you as well. And then strategic directions is just finding those opportunities that will allow you to incorporate students into your research in the way that best suits you. There's a lot of different ways. You can have full-fledged education programs. You can be in a classroom in a K through 12 environment. You can run a training program with 10 or more students, or you can just have a research grant that has a heavy mentorship component and have students supported in your lab. And so, strategize based on your goals and, our students' goals. sort of related things that I do right now that might help you recruit students and get students in your lab. Through HRSC on STEM, I oversee the experiential education certificate offered in the College of Science and Engineering. So if you're recruiting students, we have students in here looking for experiential learning. And then I also am the organizer for our upcoming STEM conference, which is a student-focused conference, and so we are accepting registrations and presentations now. So if you have students doing research, they can present there, and you can put that in your grant application. And so please feel free to reach out to me if you have more questions or want to talk about a specific element. I'm always happy to talk about our students getting training and our postdocs getting training for STEM workforce development and research. And thank you for your time. It was great talking to y'all.